They called me the ghost of Willow Lane, the last original inhabitant in a street now lined with houses that looked like teeth too white, too perfect. At 90, you become a monument to a world that no longer exists. The children on the street think I've always been this old. A feature of the landscape, like the gnarled oak in Mrs. Henderson's yard before they cut it down. They don't know I was a girl here. A girl they said would never be anything. I hear their cars whisper by my little blue house, the one my father built with his own hands, the one I refused to sell no matter how many zeros they offered. I sit on this porch every afternoon. The swing creaks a familiar song. I watch, I wait, and sometimes they come to me, like today, a young man in a crisp shirt carrying a leather folder. He had the look of a polite vulture, a developer's assistant. He walked up my path with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Jason Miller, from Miller & Sons Development." I knew the name. His grandfather was Billy Miller. Billy Miller, who pinned me against the soda fountain in '52 and told the whole drugstore I was easy because my dress was Billy Miller, whose father owned the bank that almost took our house. We represent a consortium that's very interested in this property. This whole block, really, you're the last holdout. He said it like it was a cute quirk, an old woman's stubbornness. He opened his folder, showing slick renderings of condominiums, named the residences at Willow Grove, where my hydrangeas bloomed. They planned a concrete fountain. We're prepared to offer a very generous sum. You could live anywhere. A beautiful retirement community. He named a number. It was, indeed, generous. Enough to buy 10 of my little houses. He leaned in, oozing confidential warmth. It's time, don't you think, to enjoy your golden years without the burden of this old place. I looked past him, down the lane. I could almost see them. My ghosts. Miss Abbott from the schoolhouse, who told my mother I was uneducable because I preferred watching ants in the dirt to her multiplication tables. Mr. Gaybell at the grocer's, who shortchanged my mother every week because she was a widow, and he thought she couldn't count. Billy Miller and his gang, their laughter like sharp stones. And my own Aunt Clara, who took me in after Mama died and told me daily I was a burden with a face too plain to ever find a husband. They are all gone, dust and memory, and I am here, on my porch. I looked back at young Jason Miller. He had his grandfather's jawline. "Tell me, Jason," I said, my voice the sound of dry leaves, but steady. "Did your grandfather ever talk about this street? About the people who lived here?" He blinked, thrown. I don't know, maybe he talked about the old days. Sometimes, I bet he didn't talk about Elsie Caldwell, the nothing girl from the nothing house. I saw a flicker in his eyes. Not recognition, but discomfort. He wanted the deal, not a history lesson. "The offer is only good for the week," he said, retreating to his script. "I'll leave the packet." He set it on the wicker table. Anne almost fled, his polished shoes too loud on my flagstone path. I picked up the glossy rendering. I traced the lines of the imagined condos with a wrinkled finger. They wanted to bury my history under poured concrete and call it progress. They wanted to buy my silence. The last witness. I sat there as the afternoon light turned gold, and I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about the money. It was about the story, the one they tried to erase. I went inside to the front room that still smells of my mother's rose water. On the bookshelf, between a Bible and a book of wildflowers, is a simple, fireproof lockbox. I opened it. Inside are not deeds or stocks. Inside are my weapons, my photographs, black and white, curled at the edge. Me as a girl, standing right there in that yard, my dress too big, my mother, thin and fierce, hanging laundry, my father's hands on the porch rail he built, and the letters. Every cruel note passed in class, every dismissive report card from Miss Abbott, the eviction notice from Miller's Bank, stamped, paid in full by my mother after 3 years of cleaning offices at night, my Aunt Clara's diary, where I found the entry, "The girl is a millstone." Pretty words won't fill her empty head. I gathered them, not with anger, but with the calm of a curator. This was my museum, and it was time for an exhibit. The next day, I didn't wait for another Jason to come. I called the local historical society. A bright-voiced woman named Chloe answered. I'm Elsie Caldwell, I said. Of 221 Willow Lane. I believe I have some primary sources on the founding and social history of this neighborhood that might be of interest. Photographs, documents, from the perspective of the people who weren't in the boardrooms. There was a stunned silence, then fervent interest. They came within the hour. Chloe and an older man named Ben, their eyes wide with the thrill of discovery. As I laid the items on my dining table, a century spilled out. This is incredible, Ben breathed, handling the paid eviction notice with gloved hands. This contradicts the official narrative of the Millerbanks community's support. Yes, I said quietly, it does. Then I called the editor of the local paper, a man whose byline I'd read for years. I offered him something better than a human interest piece about a stubborn old lady. I offered him a scandal buried in time. Come and see, I said. He came. He saw. His pen flew across his notebook. But my final call was the most important. I called Willow Lane's Neighborhood Association. I invited them, and all their children and grandchildren, to an open house this coming Saturday to hear about the real history of their street before it was paved and renamed. The word spread. Curiosity, a powerful poison to complacency, did its work. On Saturday, they came. Not just Jason Miller, lurking at the back with a scowl, but dozens of them. Young couples who lived in the Miller-built homes, their children, a few older folks who've remembered whispers. I stood in my small living room, a 90-year-old woman in a simple blue dress, surrounded by my ghosts made tangible. I didn't shout, I didn't accuse, I simply told. I held up the photograph of my mother. This is Eleanor Caldwell. She worked nights so Miller's bank wouldn't take this house. She died at 50, her hands raw from scrubbing. I read Miss Abbott's report card aloud. Shows a pronounced disinterest in civilizing pursuits. A young teacher in the crowd winced. I passed around my aunt's diary, the cruel entry marked. Then I looked at Jason Miller. The room was silent, every eye on him. Your grandfather, Billy, told me I was nothing, that I'd never be anything. He's gone, and I'm still here, in the house my father built. And now, I paused, letting the weight of the documents in the room settle. I am the keeper of the story, the true story of Willow Lane, and I have decided not to sell it. To you, or to anyone. I am donating this house, and all its contents, to the Historical Society. It will become the Caldwell Archive. A preserved piece of the past you want to bulldoze, so your children and your grandchildren can come and learn what really happened here. The silence in my living room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Jason Miller's face was a spectacular canvas of shock, rage, and dawning professional ruin. The condominium project was dead. You cannot build the residences at Willow Grove around a historical archive that details your family's predatory practices. The young parents looked at their children, then at my photographs, with new eyes. The story of their pretty street had rotted foundations, and I had just shown them the cracks. A woman with a toddler on her hip spoke first, her voice soft with awe. You're giving it all away, your home. I nodded. It was never just a house. It is a witness, and witnesses should not be silenced or sold. They should be heard. Ben, from the Historical Society, stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. This is the single most significant civic donation in our county's history. Elsie, you have preserved a truth that was about to be paved over. He glared at Jason, a quiet, scholarly defiance. The newspaper editor was already on his phone, whispering urgent phrases. Front page, legacy of exploitation, living history. Jason Miller found his voice, a splutter of wounded privilege. This is slander. These are private documents, taken out of context. I turned to him. I felt no heat, only a profound, glacial calm. Are they? The bank's letterhead is not private. My aunt's diary, written in her own hand, is context. Your grandfather's actions were not private to me, Jason. They were my life. I picked up the old eviction notice. He came to buy my silence, to turn my memory into a fountain in a lobby. But you see, when you're told you're nothing for long enough, you have two choices. You can believe it, or you can realize that nothing is a blank page. And you can write your own story on it. I wrote mine. And now, it is the official record. He left then, shoving through the small crowd, his leather folder crumpled under his arm. His legacy, unlike mine, would be footnotes in the archive. He despised. The others lingered, hesitant, respectful. They asked gentle questions. I showed a little girl in a sunflower dress the photo of my father building the porch where she now stood. "He made this for me," I said. Her small finger touched the glass. "Strong." "Yes," I said. "It is." In the weeks that followed, the machinery of legacy ground into motion. The Oys drew up the donation papers. The Historical Society launched a fundraising campaign to maintain the house as a living museum. My little blue house was granted a historical preservation status that made it untouchable. The condominium project was officially withdrawn. The newspaper article ran, and it did not paint the Miller family kindly. It painted a portrait of resilience, of a quiet woman who outlasted her detractors by simply, stubbornly living. They called me a local hero. I am not a hero. I am a rememberer. On the day I signed the final papers, I sat on my porch swing one last time as the owner. Ben and Chloe were inside, cataloging with reverent care. A car pulled up. It was not a developer. It was an older couple, well-dressed, with a teenage boy slouching in the back. The woman approached, her eyes red-rimmed. "Miss Caldwell, I'm Sarah Miller, Jason's mother, Billy's daughter." I said nothing. I just waited. She wrung her hands. I read the article. I knew some of it. The way my father talked about people, about this street. I never had the courage to confront it, to say he was wrong. Her husband stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his face grave. The teenage boy got out, looking at my house, at me, with open curiosity, free of his father's bitterness. "He's not a bad man, my Jason," she pleaded, though whether to me or herself, I couldn't tell. "He just only learned one story, the family story of success. A building. Some things need to be torn down before you can build something true," I said, not unkindly. She nodded, tears falling. "I want my grandson," she said, gesturing to the boy, "to know the whole story. Would you tell him what it was really like?" I looked at the boy. He had his great-grandfather Billy's hair, but his eyes were clear, unburdened. He was the future, the one who could choose which story to carry. "Come inside," I said, not to Sarah, but to the boy. His name was Leo. I showed him the photograph of Billy Miller at the soda fountain, young and cruel. I showed him the eviction notice his family's bank issued. I told him about my mother's raw hands. I did not sugarcoat. He listened, his face serious. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. 2 words I never heard from his great-grandfather. They were enough. They are 90 years in the making. I moved out the next week, not to a retirement community, but to a small, sunny cottage behind the Historical Society. A caretaker's residence where I can hear the children on school tours, visiting my old house. I can hear their questions, their surprise. I am 90. I outlived everyone who told me I was nothing. The bullies, the bankers, the cruel teachers, the dismissive relatives. I outlived them all. And now I tell their grandchildren my story. Not to shame them, but to free them. To free them from the lie that history belongs only to the victors, to the builders, to the ones who shout the loudest. Sometimes history belongs to the quiet girl on the porch, who is paying attention, who kept the evidence, who had the last word by living long enough to say it. My revenge is not a headline. It is a footnote that became the main text. It is a house that became a monument. It is a life they said would be nothing, turned into a lesson for generations. And every day, when I hear a child's laugh from the yard of the little blue house, I know I have built something, too. Something no developer can ever tear down. I built a truth, and it is finally, forever, home.